About 2 years ago, I started a project called Shrubscriber, which is a bit of a mouthful. But what we do is we grow plants and then we donate plants to school and community groups. And so these behind me aren't goji, but they are native to China. These are apricot pits that were sent over from Harbin, China to Brooks, Alberta, and eventually Guerrilla Gardened in Edmonton and harvested off those trees and planted in my backyard. And Shrubscriber is a community that runs kind of a distributed plant nursery. And so we learn how to grow plants, we share knowledge and ideas, and we basically geek out over plants and the things that plants can do. And we then hand them out into the community. And one of the ways that we do that is we've been partnering with post-secondary groups and schools. So as an example, King's University put together this urban heat island map of the city of Edmonton for us so that we can identify parts of the city that are hotter and cooler, and maybe reach out to groups working in parts of Edmonton that are experiencing extreme temperatures due to climate change, and find ways to get plants into those communities. We've also done some work with a great group at NATE, and they took a look at social data, like things like, we know, as an example, through their research, they uncovered that the elderly or children are more susceptible to extreme heat. We know that recent immigrants or people who don't speak English as a first language have a harder time accessing resources than other folks. And so they took a look at social demographic data and came up with different neighborhoods in the city that are demographically more impacted by the effects of climate change. And so what we do as a group is we try to identify schools or community groups working in those areas, and we take the plants that we've been growing and we donate them to further increase the forest canopy and climate resilience, or grow food, or whatever the goals of those particular communities are. And so over not quite 2 years, we've donated hundreds of trees to schools and to nonprofits. These are some little gojis actually directly behind me, to groups that work with newcomers and their gardening initiatives, or even folks who've been here for a little while, but who could use a little bit of extra help because their gardens or their plants have come on a hard time. We also have an interest in heritage plants in general, and so this is Abbas, a really interesting gentleman who does all of this kind of botanical art, kind of like a bonsai type style. And so we've been giving him seedlings from heritage trees across the city, and he's been doing miniature versions of them. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is we've been able to share a lot of this data that we've gathered using help from post-secondary schools. And the city of Edmonton has taken it and is actually using some of that data to make some decisions on where to plant trees. And so this is a park in Alberta Avenue, just off 95th Street and 114th Ave. And these are some proposed plants that and its location was specifically chosen because our data suggested that it would be a great place for planting. And then one of the things that we've been doing, this is going to loop back to Goji's, is we've been partnering with schools and we've been bringing seeds and propagation equipment to them. This isn't Goji beside me. These are apricots, but we bring soil and propagation kits and seeds to schools. These are all Goji behind me. And so this fall, we've partnered with 39 different schools, a lot of them getting Goji collected from local trees or local shrubs. And so we have like 1,200 students right now growing out Goji and then planting them in their neighborhoods. I'll keep the infomercial short, but we're able to do this work because our members support 3, 6, or 12 tree donations per year, in addition to get seeds and learn how to grow plants and come and hang out at the nursery and do workshops. And so we're going to do a grafting workshop up in the next little bit. Just this weekend, we're going to go and take some cuttings and do have kind of a social event afterwards. And so most of us are local. If this interests you at all, please check it out because it does help us further do the work that we're doing. I first heard about our heritage goji plants in Edmonton from this gentleman behind me. So this is Thien Phan, and Thien is Malaysian, and he came to Alberta and worked for, I think, 24 years for Alberta agriculture, specifically in fruit and shrub breeding. And so he did a lot of work at the Center for Crop Diversification North, which is just kind of off Fort Edmonton Road here in the city of Edmonton. And he I think I was just chatting with him in conversation. He said, that there's like goji plants all over the place. And this is probably about 10 15 years ago. And I said, no, I don't know that, say more. And he actually said, go to the Shaw Conference Center and walk around, and you should find some there. And I ended up doing that in probably like mid-February, not really knowing what a goji plant looked like. Walked around, actually walked around with Catherine Lennon, who was doing a podcast. And so we were searching for the, Edmonton's hidden goji. And it's hilarious because in hindsight, we definitely walked by many goji patches. It was a few years later when I was just riding my bike through Louis McKinney Park, where I noticed, I just was riding and I thought, oh my God, those are gojis. And I stopped, and sure enough, there was gojis all over the place. I wrote a little bit more and there was more gojis, and I wrote a little bit more and there was more gojis. And so I quickly realized, actually, we're surrounded by these goji plants. They have naturalized themselves to parts of the river valley, in addition to being cultivated by Edmontonians, for 100 plus years. And so here's a photo of some goji and there's that Shaw Conference Center, the Edmonton Convention Center, just behind it here. And, behind this photo would be like the Courtyard Marriott Hotel. So that should give you a bit of an idea of where that's located. It's kind of funny. I met my partner in a few years later, and I was, I was meeting her parents for the first time, and we're sitting at the kitchen table. It's probably February again, and I look out the kitchen window, and I see this shrub in the back alley, and I said, "Oh my God, your neighbor has goji." And they said, "Oh no, they're not goji. They're like it's a weird little pepper." And they said the neighbors were Chinese, and they said they grew these little peppers. And I said, those are definitely gojis. And so goji is in the Solanaceae family, the same family as peppers and tomatoes. And so one way of looking at them is as this little, it's this little pepper or a little tomato. And here's Jess, my partner, picking some of those goji there. And here's here's a look at the fruit from them. This, by the way, this is the very fruit that we gathered seeds from, and then brought to handing out to classes. So they're coming off of that particular plant. I live in Macaulay. Here's a lovely goji plant growing at the Macaulay Community Garden. Here's one growing in a back alley a few blocks from me. And so, despite the fact that I learned about this plant and it took me a few years to find it, once I found it, really truly discovered that it was everywhere. And I started researching heritage plants. The story of the goji is something that I was really interested in exploring. And then along comes Yong Fei, and Yong Fei is from China, is a local artist, and is very interested in goji and has a lot of personal experience with this plant. And so we started walking around the neighborhood and finding plants. And of course, Young has a lot more knowledge, a cultural knowledge especially, of this particular plant, and has been able to talk to many of my neighbors who speak different languages than I do. And so it's been, I've really enjoyed watching her explore the history of goji in Edmonton. And I've gotten a little peek at the book that she's been putting together. It's absolutely beautiful, and I want to turn over the microphone to artist Yong Fei Guan to talk about her experience hunting down the history of goji in Edmonton.
Am I on the big screen now?
You're not yet, but if you hit
Okay.
share screen, yeah, if you hit share screen.
So do you mean I should share the screen?
Yeah, so if you go share screen,
Yeah.
and then you go, you can, there's a few different ways. You're on basic, but if you pick your presentation, it will show up. It's not going to do the fancy thing where your head's in the corner. It'll just show the presentation. There's a few more steps to get
So should I just like choose my presentation now?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
And then you'll go large screen. There you go.
There.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Yong Fei Guan. Thank you, Dustin, for this invitation, and also the wonderful description of how we connect and what is this project is about. As what Dustin mentioned, I am a local artist. I have been living in Edmonton for about 15 years. And right now I am doing our artistic community research about local Goji. So I'm gonna just like first, before I run the slide, I'm gonna tell you what I'm about to talk about. So the first I want to talk about the history of Goji berry, particularly in Canada and in Edmonton. And secondly, I want to talk about how culturally we use it, and then at the end I will talk about propagation. So here the image you see is wild Goji that is near Courtyard Hotel. So the wild Goji usually is a lot. The looking of it is a little bit different than the one that we propagate from the Chinese immigrants' backyard. So so the wild Goji is, as you can see, it have been here for a while, and they become like pretty tough and also really content to grow in this zone in Edmonton, particularly in the River Valley area. Maybe it's the latitude that made them able to be content to grow here. So we believe this wild Goji in the River Valley that actually been in Edmonton since the first Chinese moved to Edmonton in the 1890s, early 1890s. So as I do this research, apparently after the completion of the Trans-Canada Railway in the 1880s, the Chinese worker that in Canada, some stay in Canada, opened up like laundries and restaurant and other business. And the first Chinese is come from Calgary to Edmonton, which is the first person is in 1890s. I think shortly after Edmonton became a city, like just in a few years, Edmonton became a city. So after he came, and then shortly after is his brother, also from Calgary. I think they are trying to run away from the chicken pot. Is it called chicken pot at that time? So so after the first Chinese come here, and they particularly the first Chinese person, he opened up a laundry shop, was his brother. Soon after, many other Chinese people also moved to Alberta, and particularly Edmonton. So in the early time, when I learned about the head tax and the Chinese Immigration Act in 1923, apparently the Chinese people cannot enter Canada anymore from China. So at that time, it create a lot of like racial tension, and also seems like the Chinese people are really afraid that they cannot come back to Canada. So a lot of them are really afraid, and they don't want to. They don't have really a lot of money to go back to get married or bring a wife here to pay like $500 at that time. So they end up like a lot of like bachelor society in different area in Canada, like Victoria, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge. So there's like lots of people that unable to like really leave the country or come in. So as because of that time really difficult to like transport, like carry their belonging here. They probably, when they come, because we possibly it's a one-way trip, they probably bring as much as possible. At that time, like most of them at that time left in the 19th century. A lot of the people are from southern China. And at that time, southern China also facing a lot of drought, is it called drought? Like the farm are drying up. What's that called? I forgot the name.
Yeah, drought.
Drought, yes. So the Chinese farmers try to survive and flee the country to somewhere, or trying to find work somewhere. So that's when the first Chinese come from the southern China in the 19th century, and come here for mining, or shortly after mining is the PRC. So anyway, I'm going back to the Goji. So because of that, they are probably bringing like medicine, like herbal medicine with them, and also like seed, like for example, Goji, or more than likely they bring cuttings, because the Goji cutting actually can survive really far away. So that's how we think that after the first Chinese in the 1890s came to Edmonton, and that is like roughly when the Pacific Railway is finished, they migrate to this Perry province to try to start a new life. So at that time, it was particularly in Calgary, was facing a lot of racist problems. So when after the first Chinese brothers come to here, we think that the Chinese immigrant landed near where the Hotel McDonald and Shaw Conference area to open their store, business, or restaurant, or laundry shop. So that's where they work. And I don't think they own any property there, and they just rent a space for work. And they also all of these men are also live in where they work. Like for example, they work in a laundry shop, they will also live there. So because in a sense that is their home, so they probably plant some seed or trying to grow a vegetable, just trying to survive with their own the food that they recognize. So they try to grow stuff. So probably that's when it starts. The Goji, when it starts from the River Valley, near Hotel McDonald, the area extended to Shaw Conference, that area. So so that area is roughly between 95th Street to 98th Street. and then from Jasper Avenue to North Saskatchewan River. So when in the 70s, a lot of goji berry in that area got taken out because of to make space for the Shark Conference Center, which is the conventional center right now. So some Chinese in the 70s, some is from my interview, and some is from just like people shares their story in the local community. So some of the elderly Chinese in the 70s, because of the removal of the goji berry, they actually came to rescue the fruits and also trying to take some cuttings. So even though they uproot a lot of goji berry in the area, but still today you can find a lot of surviving goji in that area because they are like the roots are so deep and they're so rooted in the ground, and I guess they're also very resilient. So I guess that's the like nature of the plant. A lot of the plants here have to survive the tough winter. They can't really just like trying to take out all the plant essentially, and some plants survive there. So in the past few years, I haven't show you any image. Sorry, everyone.
We got the one, and it's a good one.
Okay, so this one is part about just a little bit visual from the internet about the Chinese worker working on the CRP, Canadian Pacific Railroad. Yeah. So here's like a little bit. This image is archival, is of BC in the 1889. So it's just like about when the railroad is about to complete. This is like some of the Chinese worker that is like afterward how they live, and showing how what kind of working condition and environment. I thought this is an interesting photo, so I went to the Calgary Library Archive to get a permission to use this in my exhibition. So this is like where Dustin and I found the most of the wild goji that can be easily harvested. They are also another type of goji that we only harvest the leaf, and we call them goji vegetable, like goji choy, goji vegetable. And this one we just is really the seed. When we call it goji, it can be the plant, the leaf, or the fruits. So we actually in Cantonese we specifically call goji berry seeds. Seeds means like the fruit, the seed of the plant, that goji plant. So all right. So here is right next to Courtyard Hotel, and this is as you can see is underneath Hotel McDonald. And around Hotel McDonald has so many goji berry, and they are like the two different type. They are just like so similar because they both are become really tough in the wild. So for me, I don't know if they're interbreeding or just become really tough in this weather, or I'm just seeing one type because they are like sometimes it looks different plant looks like, oh, they are different, but sometimes it looks like they're the same. Like I need like an expert to go there to take a second look with me. So this is like just showing how much goji in the same spot. It's just like a little bit close up. And this is a little bit more close up to see the wild goji. Yeah, like for me, I sometimes we will have a hard time to know if this is like the goji vegetable that for the leaf or the one. This is the one. I think this one is the goji that for the berries that we use for soup. So this is another picture in the wild to show you. I noticed through this research that actually sparrow love goji berry. Every time I interview someone, they would talk about the birds, and then they would talk about those sparrow that like how much they take from from the goji. So it's like a really like a love-hate relationship, I can tell. So I'm going to go to talk about a little bit more into like how through this project that I researched for the past few years. So I interviewed quite a few of Chinese elder particularly, and particularly the what's that called, the old shrub, that like really old shrub. I'm more interested in their history and how did they grow it in a way that is like so resilient. So the first Chinese grandma, Canadian grandma that I interviewed is in 2020. It's really at that time it's not even an interview, just like we just really curious about local goji, because from southern China I eat the goji in dry form. We purchase it in dry, and we never got a chance to actually experience them fresh. So for me, it's like something that I'm so familiar with, but it's also something the goji is like something culturally familiar with, but it's something also ecologically unfamiliar with. So I'm really which for me is like really exciting, because I just love learning about like something I already know. It feels like just like a really interesting just position. So I interviewed this Chinese grandma, and she have a 51 years old goji plant in her backyard in Otwell neighborhood. So this plant is like quite tall, about 11 feet, but it's like really wide. It's like 15 feet wide. So it's really long. So it was a plant that originally grown it by Grandma Law's hometown by her mother. So this in that Hangzhou village in Zhaoqing in China. So Law bought the cutting from the plant that when she from her mother's village when she moved to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong she cut the cutting again, and she bought the cutting from Hong Kong to Edmonton in 1972. So I found that like the story is very interesting about this goji plant, because like it's such a like it's not just about migration or immigration, but it's also about how the plant move around through, I guess in this case, through human migration. So it's just like something that we like just a different way of telling a story through more like a plant's perspective than not focus on the human perspective. I thought it's quite interesting. So the Grandma Law, she often, because she bought the plant, the cutting from Hong Kong, and she have lots of family in Hong Kong. Then every year she will dry the goji at home, and also send some of the goji she dry to send it to Hong Kong to his family. So I thought this is just all this story about how the goji travel through human, and it just really made me feel very emotional. That's simply can describe that. The reason well, her daughter-in-law said she just loved to grow plant, but for me, the connection with her goji is not because of it's a personal, very intimate connection with her mother, and also how the intimate connection between her new home and her old home in Hong Kong. The connection through goji is really something that I find that can consider as our heritage. So for Law, Grandma Law, she think goji berry are very good for eyesight. So she often makes soup for her family, and she think the goji make the soup sweeter. Here's the backyard of here's the backyard of the Grandma Law's the top roof. So the next one is Joe Wong. Joe Wong is also from Hong Kong. So Joe Wong is another Chinese Canadian that live in Edmonton, and he moved from Hong Kong to Edmonton in 1955. And after he came here, he worked in the market garden with his uncle Bart Jing Wong. Joe Wong and Bart Jing Wong's story also in one of the local book called Why Grow Here. In the chapter called Invisible Tapestry. Joe Wong, he loved goji. He has 5 really big goji shrub that is about 25 years old, and he is Joe Wong. This is early July. This is probably August or late July. The goji. So this is something that I want to learn from you guys. What is this tree? Because I thought goji and acidic soil doesn't work well together. Anyway, so the next one, I want to talk about the goji berry and the goji lover in Macaulay neighborhood, which is Dustin, really close to Dustin. So Mr. John, he absolutely loved goji. He actually have a goji paradise in Macaulay. So he's another angle of his front yard. This is another angle of his front yard. But he grow a goji front and the backyard just crazy. But he also grow a little bit of other plant, but goji seems like the only thing he liked to grow, I guess. So apparently, when I do the chemical test that is collected locally from 7 different samples in frozen and fresh form. So Mr. John's goji apparently have the highest antioxidant capacity locally. Even the one that we even compare it with the one that is claimed to have like really good medicinal function that is imported from China, Ningxia, China. So his dry goji is even higher capacity, antioxidant capacity than the one that imported from China. So here's like another view of Mr. Zhang and I in August or September last year. We when it's harvesting season. Mr. Zhang recently tried to protect his goji berry by like putting nets on. So the last community person I'm going to talk about tonight is Buddy Kashiba. He also have a 33 years old goji shrub. Oh, by the way, Mr. Chang's goji shrub is about 40 years old, and he has lots of them in different ages, but the oldest one is about 41 years old. So his goji shrub is also really, really old. So Buddy Kashiba have a 33 years old goji shrub. He got it from his Hong Kong friend a while ago. But when the friend gave him the goji shrub, is already like about 10 years old. So he actually got a pretty old goji shrub in that case because he transplanted the whole plant. So we think that is about 33 years old, the plant that he has. Oh, I'm going to show you the plant that is like 2 years ago. It's in like this, about 12 feet tall. And this is like really a lot of space, south facing, and he make it really nicely. So it's like get all the attention in his backyard. This is like a close up of the same shrub. And this is like in different season. I think this is like July, late July, early August. And this must be like in late August. I also found a local goji attract a lot of bees. So maybe Dustin can help me to see, take a look what kind of bees there are on. I put quite a few pictures.
These are all, those are all honeybees. And I've noticed that honeybees specifically seem to really like them. Yeah, Apis mellifera.
Yeah. So, okay, so I'm going to talk about goji berry, the medicinal, or a little bit of touch on the history back in China. So goji, first I want to talk about cultivation in China first, because goji berry was found in the wild in China, but they actually massively produce it, like they cultivate in the Tang Dynasty. So in the major commercialized cultivation started around 600 years ago in Zhonglin County of Ningxia Province, which is like where supply pretty much internationally in all the world. Ningxia goji, you will hear, oh, they have the best goji, but which is something that I'm doubt about, because why they will have the best goji. Like what is the difference? Like why? Because I checked the temperature is like similar to where we are, and it's just like the condition just really similar. So I really want to scientifically analyze that. Is not something they can always claim anymore. So there's at least 2 variants that grow in Edmonton, both in the wild and also in the community of immigrants' backyard. One is called Lycium barbarium L, and the other one is this Goji that cultivate only for the leaf, but actually they also produce fruit that is smaller, rounder, the skin is tougher and more bitter. So the first one that is the Goji that we grow is for the longer and sweeter fruit. So the second one is called Lycium genesee male. This one is really not common as a goji berry because we like to eat, but we like to cultivate the leaf for vegetable. And this one we don't like the leaf because we think the leaf is actually tougher, less tender to eat, but the fruit is more juicy and sweeter. And if you're lucky, you might occasionally get one that it really looks like tomato. And it's also from a Chinese immigrant's backyard locally. So the next I'm going to talk about drying of the goji, because apparently all this research showing that actually when it's dry up, the concentration, the medicinal concentration or the chemical also increase by 3 times. So it's very fascinating, like everything will increase, sugar level, everything. So just like something that I want to learn more, because this is like the form, the condition that I'm most familiar with culturally. So, but it turned out to be a great way of eating it scientifically, and also a very effective way to storage for soup later, for anything later. So I use just like a herb dryer to sun dry, and a lot of people doesn't really recommend this method because the sun is so short and it will be very easy to get molded. So the whole summer last year I was trying to experimenting with dry method, how to sun dry them more to increase to make it more effectively. So this is some of the sun dry one that I collect from different neighborhood and also use for chemical analysis. And this is like a close up of some of the dry local berry from the neighborhood. And so this is another way of drying. It's not sun dry. You can tell it's much drier that way too, which is like use a dehydrator. Yeah. And so for like how to consume it, goji berry is just like most of the berry, you can consume it fresh. And I really like it fresh. I wish I can just have fresh goji berry all year long, but they are so delicious. So, but they also dry up pretty easily if you want to just like dehydrate it to use it later for soup, salad. They kind of like taste like raisin to me, except they also have a little bit like tartness. The one that is in blue are local Saskatoon berries. So another way that I'm familiar with when I was back in China, in southern China, is we use the Lycium genesee, which is the goji vegetable, to pan fry them with eggs, or use the goji leaf, the goji vegetable, the vegetable type, to make soup with ground pork for summer. It's like both are some summer dish, and we believe that can clean. It's very cleansing, good for your intestine, and we like purify yourself. That is like, I think is going back to the antioxidant capacity that is helping us to detox. So we use it in congee, in soup, made soup, or fried eggs. Yeah, like pretty much how you cook your vegetable, I guess. So I think we cultivate this with Dustin a couple years ago. These are like picture of Dustin's cultivation from Goji cutting that probably collected from the River Valley, I think.
Yeah, I think these ones were from that same plant that we showed earlier by the Courtyard Marriott.
Yeah. So so his cultivation is a little bit different than mine. Mine is well, I start from indoor, and he probably start from indoor too. Not sure. So for me, I cultivate indoor first, and then so this is like about a week, no, probably more than a week. Well, the one that we are doing is like just freshly cultivated, and the one that further away is probably about 10 days of less, more than 10 days of cultivation. So this is like a close-up of how we cultivate it. I don't know, like grow lights. It's pretty straightforward. And also like the lid is really helpful for me. The hormone inducer for the roots, the bottom part is also I believe is helpful. That is like after a month and a half, I bring it outside, and that's about a month and a half, I can think. And this is how I think also Dustin grow this from seed, Goji seed. And this is like also I think it's from seed, but I didn't grow them. It's partly because Shiba, he just kind of like to pull out all the weed Goji, and so I collect all of them from so, but they all from like dropping of seed from the year before. So I collect them in the spring. So another way that for me to like play around is like Goji. I mean not Goji. Compost lab that I'm trying to create is like the bottom part is the compost, and the top part can be like a cultivation station with the light on top. And this is what it looked like. And this is what it looked like. Yeah, so just like kind of not necessarily super practical yet, but but it's kind of like trying to figure out some stuff, how to make it more aesthetically and interesting and but also functional. So that this picture is 2 years ago at least, and that's how the second year come back, the budding of the second year's cuttings. So that's what it looked like after a couple of weeks, and that's what it looked, not after a couple of weeks, sorry, the second year cutting come back after a couple of weeks, and this is like the second year cutting that after about a month. So my backyard also have this Goji, and when I got it from Buddy Shiba, one of my neighborhood's brother, and this is apparently he said it's about 3 years old, and I just want to show you how long the roots. They are like to me it's like longer than the top. The plant is the roots is much longer. So I am actually having an exhibition at Edmonton Park this summer in the beginning of August to mid-September. So I will talk about more the history of Goji, and also showed some art installation and some interactive map that mapping out most of the goji in the public space. So yeah, welcome to join if you are around town, and it's August, from beginning of August to mid-September. And I also donate some goji with the help of Dustin. We also donate some goji for Edmonton Park as well. So it's going to have some Asian representation there from now on. I think I didn't run over too much time.
Yeah, we've got 1 minute left technically.
Oh, okay.
So you did good.
Okay.
I didn't want to cut you off because I was enjoying everything. And so, but I know that we said we would kind of wrap things up about 8, but I do want to maybe just throw out the opportunity for folks to ask some questions to Yong Fei about anything in the presentation or anything that is kind of that came to mind. The one other thing I will say is I mentioned that Yong Fei had put together or is putting together a book. I've seen kind of a first version of it, and right now it's being
So it's gonna be similar to this, but it might be a little bit design-wise different, because I also want to translate them. So I don't really know what the final cover will look like yet, but yeah, it's gonna be available for Edmonton Park, like the gift store, in August as well.
Yeah, it's very beautifully illustrated. It's I think done by Amanda Schutz, who's a local illustrator. Yeah, it's full of beautiful information, and it looks beautiful. But if there's any questions out there, yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. You could also throw it in the comment section if you prefer to stay mic or off mic. Joanne had a question here. Joanne said, my mother brought cuttings in the 50s. My aunt took cuttings off of it. I took cutting off my mom's. I always have too many berries to use. Is there a place to donate them? It sounds like maybe Yong Fei and Joanne, maybe you need to connect. If nothing else, there's a kind of an interesting story there. So a cutting in the 50s. That's yeah, that's an old plant. Yong Fei, if you have contact information like an email, I put your website address in there. But if you have an email and you'd like if folks to reach out or maybe tell you about their Goji stories or have Goji questions, feel free to share that. I have a question, Yong Fei. It sounds like, oh, Yong Fei posted your comment directly to me, but I will post it for everybody. There's Yong Fei's email. Yong Fei, you mentioned that in southern China, you're familiar with the fruit, but you weren't familiar with the fresh fruit. So I kind of had made the assumption, but correct me if I'm wrong, it does not sound like Goji grows in southern China, that you have to go to northern China or further north to find the planting cultivation. Is that correct?
Yeah, in southern China it's hot and humid, so that is pretty much the opposite growing condition, because Goji actually like to grow in a colder climate and in a dry area. So it's actually not the right condition. And then the soil probably is not the same too. So yeah, we cannot able to cultivate goji berry in our region. And it was like a really happy surprise for me that it can grow where I live right now, which is like, it feels like really special.
I love that. Well, if there's no questions, I want to say thank you so much for coming out. There has been a recording of this, which I can send out a link to where to find that afterwards if you want to go back and view any of this information, or share it with some friends or family who are interested in Goji. And I really want to thank Yong Fei for presenting today. I really appreciate you and the work that you've been doing, cataloging these plants and tracking down their stories. I think it's something sort of really unique, and I think it's a piece of Edmonton history that has been untold until now. So I appreciate it. And if you
Thank
do
you,
have some
everyone.
And if you do have some questions, I'll hang
Don't
out
be
for a couple
shy.
minutes.
Come on.
I can't promise you, excuse me, I'm not going to make Young Fei hang out past 8 o'clock. But if you've got to run, feel free to run. If you want to stick around and chat for a moment or two, we can take another couple minutes and do so. But we did say 7 to 8, so thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Fern says, are there any plants that look very similar that could be mistaken for Goji?
Oh, is that asking me? Oh, okay. um, Similar looking. I guess it's like, no, not really. Like people think there might be like little pepper, Chinese pepper, but Chinese pepper doesn't really look like that. I never seen a Chinese pepper look like that. Actually, I think it's quite unique, but the identifying the leaf can be tricky, especially the two leaf that like to live grow together in the Chinese families, because they usually are next to each other, and sometimes, especially they grow in the wild, sometimes they kind of like already change a little bit of
Yeah,
their.
I have noticed there's quite a bit of like, yeah, just the morphology, I guess. Like there's quite a bit of variation in the leaves between individual plants.
Mhm.
And I think part of it is you have just different growing conditions and maybe different genes, but you also have the two different species, and the one kind of has a more like blade shaped leaf, and the other one's a little bit rounder. And
Mhm.
I don't know if they actually hybridize, and so maybe you get crosses
Yeah.
between the two. But in terms of like, is it a goji or is it this other toxic plant that I might eat and it might kill me? There's not really anything similar to it. Um, Most of the red fruit that you find here, other than like a raspberry or something, which looks very different, are kind of in like clusters, like an elderberry or a mountain ash, which are, large shrubs or trees. Like they have these big clusters of fruit. Whereas, goji kind of have these individual fruits that hang off the plant. They look very different. I think too, if you cut the fruit open, um, you'll see it does look like the cross section of a little tomato. You're going to see lots of little seeds as opposed to like one single pit. Um, the other thing about it is when it flowers, if you're familiar with what a tomato flower looks like, it's yellow and it's kind of this like small 5-pointed star. Or a pepper has basically the same flower, but it's usually white. It's the same flower as those two, but it tends to be purple. So that's another way that you can kind of identify it. But generally speaking, if you think it's a goji, it's probably a goji. Right, good question.
Sorry, I joined late, and so very late. I missed most of everything. But I have a pretty large and healthy goji bush in my garden, and I was just wondering, would it be valuable to have a different, like genetically different plant nearby, or does it matter? Like it makes lots of fruit and it looks good.
For like cross-pollination and stuff?
Yeah.
Mm.
Good question. I don't know if I have an answer.
I know in France, they have been like, I sometimes I go to some like Goji group, like I follow one Facebook group about Goji, like they speak mostly French, but I can see like picture, like sometimes they talk about like different name of Goji. I wonder if they're like, how did they make those like different variant? Probably it's cross pollination. And I don't know what kind of technology they have, because seem like French people learn a lot about Goji too nowadays. They do a lot of experiment, like farming Goji, and
Yeah.
do a lot of very experiment on variant.
Yeah. So like, I guess too, there's some interesting things going on here. So like when you're taking a cutting, you're making a clone, right? And so technically that plant that you showed in Otwell, who she brought a cutting from Hong Kong, like that is an identical clone to that original plant. So you could say it's the same variety, but if you grew them from seed, every single one of them is going to be genetically distinct. My hunch is, if you planted gojis that were genetically distinct and they cross-pollinated and, you grew those seeds out, you're going to have more genetic variety, and there's could be, some interesting crosses and things that come out of it. It doesn't seem like they need a pollinator nearby in order to produce lots of fruit. Like it seems like the producing fruit thing, they're pretty good at that on their own as like a single plant, just pollinating itself. But if you were to collect seeds and want to get as much variety out of those seeds as possible, then yeah, having another plant that was, genetically different nearby would probably be helpful. So I guess it depends on your goals, Chris. But it sounds like your goji's probably seems pretty happy and is producing lots of food.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my dad planted it from a cutting that he got from an old friend of his years ago. Yeah.
And that's here in the city.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, Chris, was it because we grew up in the same place? At any point was there barhead goji?
I I think that I think that we probably did have goji in our barhead garden. Although I wasn't like it's mostly from like I think the way my dad talked about it, I remember. But I don't actually remember looking at it, or I didn't help in the garden when I was a kid. So but yeah, I think he got goji from the same friend and had planted it in Barhead, and then when we lost it when we came to Edmonton, and then so he got more and planted it in my yard.
Love it. Yeah, what would be kind of cool is to follow back, these like
Yeah.
these sort of these trains of goji of who got the goji from who, and
Yeah.
to figure out how many sort of different cultivated varieties are. Because if you could figure out the difference between them, you could start giving them names, right? You could say, oh, this is like the cultivated variety, that the variety that you found here in Macaulay, that has the high and level of antioxidants, right? Like that is, maybe it's a single plant, or maybe that came from a cutting, but like, if you could identify that from place to place, then you could give it a name and try to follow it. Right now, we know they're here in Edmonton. They're thriving. People have been growing them for like more than a century. And it's just people like me who've just been like recently come onto it, right? So I'm late to the game. But yeah, I don't know if we have like those Edmonton named varieties out there yet, or if we do, it's sort of, yeah, this got this from my aunt, or got this from, down the road. Right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the interest in Goji.
Thank you, everyone.